And here we go. So Cedric Phillips, crucially on the play in this match, which very important in Standard and in Magic as a whole, especially so when you're looking at a single-minded aggressive deck against the combo control deck of the format.
Right, and this is a situation where the mono green aggro deck is already looking to kind of get out ahead of the Team of Reclamation deck and capitalize on the phases of the game that it's been developing. The fact that it also is just sort of ahead on the ahead of the curve by virtue of being on the play is just worth even more to Phillips.
And you see the gem raise there in Phillips's hand. That's a card which can tag the namesake card in the Team of Reclamation deck, but also basically every deck in the format has a good target for that, whether it's Witch's Oven, Stonecoil Serpent, and Shadow Spear, Embercleave, if you survive the turn that comes down, Elspeth Conquers Death. This Orzhov Yorion deck that we're talking about so much is full of these enchantments that you really want to hit and stop them from blinking with Yorion. So outside of just a boost in power with this kind of virtual haste going on, is also just a valuable interactive piece that can swing those races in this mono green deck.
Right, and there's a point where if let's roll back before Ikoria Standard, or before Ikoria was released, people were main decking Thrashing Bronodon left and right. The fact that Gem Razor, you don't have to sacrifice to get that naturalized, and it can even upgrade creatures like Voracious Hydra, like Stonecoil Serpent, and so on, is just more points in its favor.
Yeah, and Thrashing Brontodon always felt like a little bit of a trap where you're paying 3 mana up front for a 3-power attacker, which is fine stats, but then having to pay a mana and sacrificing it, trading 1-for-1 on a card, it just felt like a very inefficient trade a lot of the time. Gem Razor isn't even a trade, and it's a much more immediate burst of power. So, you would much rather have Gem Razor in this mono green deck. And we see Cedric, notably, main phasing the Wildborn Preserver, which is a flash creature. He could easily have held that up to play on Ari's end step, but he knows that just getting that under a possible Ether Gust or something like that is all important.
Yeah, going ahead and just knowing that it's going to resolve is going to put him in a better position. A lot of times you're trying to create situations where your opponent doesn't actually have a ton of choices.
And Ari does have 2 main deck copies of Aethergast, and crucially 2 main deck copies of Storm's Wrath, which is a card that was a staple in the Team of Reclamation decks after its release in Theros Beyond Death, and then it kind of fell out of favor. It just was clunky and not actually killing the things that you wanted it to kill. But now, as people move towards these aggro decks to fight Reclamation, Storm's Wrath suddenly is the exact card that you're looking for.
Right. This is the kind of situation where we see Cedric emphasizing the need to get a creature up to 5 power and 5 toughness to play through a card like Storm's Wrath.
And you see various incidental +1/+1 counters in this mono green deck. You have Barkhide Troll, Stonecoil Serpent, Pearl Collector we see can get counters, Growth Chamber Guardian, Wildborn Preserver, Vivian Archway Ranger can give counters to things too. So basically, every creature can get to the point where it can benefit from that synergy with Mutate.
Right, and the whole point here is just in general that there are a bunch of cards that synergize incidentally with cards that are already pretty okay. Barkhide Troll and Vivian, for example, are just going to work great together despite both being good cards in their own right.
And Cedric is going on a quest here and really putting Ari to the test. If Ari doesn't have something right now, this game is over. And we see he does have the Shark Typhoon, which can block the Wildborn Preserver. It trades with the Wildborn Preserver, and Ari can stay at 1 life, it looks like. But even then, he still has 2 lethal threats to contend with, on top of anything that might be left in Cedric's hand.
Yeah, it's really hard to see Lax finding a way out of this one. It's not impossible. Wilderness Reclamation gives a lot of mana here for Lax.
But thankfully for Cedric, still on 20, not nearly in range of an expansion explosion or anything like that, even if there are second Reclamation you're adding to the mana once again. Right. That negate is embarrassing here. Really just rotting in Ari's hand.
Right. The big thing that Lax is looking for at this juncture is just a way to basically draw an Aethergust and make a large enough shark to profitably block something.
And Cedric had the choice last turn. He could have mutated the Gem Razor onto either one of his creatures to blow up the Reclamation and still present lethal damage, if I believe, if that went in play. But I think Cedric knows that first you just want to make Ari have the right interactive piece, and then secondly, you're thinking about the range of possible cards Ari could have. There's not really much danger that the Reclamation actually poses here.
Right. The big thing is just it's all about pressure and Cedric trying to go wide, respect cards like Aether Gust, and just basically deal enough damage to get it done.
And so if Ari just announces attacks with the two creatures, the game is over. And Cedric is sniffing that out, trying to work out if Ari has, if he drew Aether Gust this turn, if he has something else, what could happen in such a way that I lose this game? What's the worst case scenario here? And so, negate will counter the Vivian, but that means that Ari shields it down. Cedric knows the coast is clear, and he can just afford to attack.
Yeah, and we see Ari Lax going down into game 1, picking him up, and saying, "All right, let's see what we can do game 2."
And so for Cedric, his sideboarding is a little simpler because in this mono green deck, you don't have a wide range of choices. So we have a clean 4-4-4-3 sideboard here to add up to 15. Do you like any of those 4s or even the 3? I imagine shifting Ceratops maybe could come into play.
Yeah, that's the first card that really sticks out here. And then from there, we're going to see Cedric likely just go a little bit lower on cards that would just be sort of traditional removal or cards that don't actually function in terms of applying a bunch of pressure. Nightpack Ambusher is really the big thing that you would normally have to worry about out of a Team of Reclamation deck in terms of things you need to kill other than Shark Typhoon tokens. Uro, you're not exactly going to get with a Prey Upon or a Smash Through, rather. But shifting Ceratops is exactly the kind of card that can just make those attacks into those sorts of things.
Would you have any interest in the Questing Beast that Ari has in his sideboard? That's a card typically to pressure other blue decks, but here it's a card that can turn the game around when it's in control for you and also trade with whatever Cedric's biggest creature is.
Yeah, it's not a card that you're necessarily super excited about having, but it is likely better than a lot of the counter magic that you'll see featured in a lot of these Team of Reclamation decks these days.
Yeah, and a 1-1 Stonecoil Serpent opening proceedings here for Cedric. He knows he just has to get on the board. He's planning to curve out with that Growth Chamber Guardian. May not have time to, maybe hold it back as a 3-3. And we see he's going to have a turn 3 play lined up. He just wants to be applying damage. He knows that this is a race. And Ari improved pretty substantially in sideboarding here. He has the quad laser full package, 4 Aether Gust, 4 Storm's Wrath per sideboard. He also gets to board in 3 copies of Scorching Dragonfire to trade with these early creatures. And then if he does want the Questing Beast or the Nightpack Ambushers, he gets those as well. No longer saddled with these mystical disputes and negates.
Right, and this Stonecoil Serpent here on 1 is just a great combo with Gem Razor. Cedric's just trying to set that up, is probably planning for this Growth Chamber Guardian to just get eaten by a removal spell, if possible, and wants to make sure that he actually just doesn't have all of his eggs in one basket.
And you can see here how Storm's Wrath often is a necessary card, but it's not sufficient. Let's say Cedric plays a Stonecoil Serpent or adapts his Growth Chamber Guardian. Even if Ari has Storm's Wrath, Cedric has 2 haste threats in the Questing Beast and the Ceratops, and then also the Mobilize Tristic, which, if he has a turn to spare, he can fire that up and get in for damage too. So these sweepers, a mediocre hand with a sweeper is often not going to do the job against this mono green deck.
Right.
A lot of options here for Cedric, deciding what he wants to go for. He ends up just hardcasting a second Growth Chamber Guardian and attacking for 3. What do you make of that choice there?
So the big thing here is just that there are a ton of cards in his hand, and he doesn't want to just be weak to any spot removal spells, and you do need to be able to go around cards like Nightpack Ambusher. So going ahead and just committing more to the battlefield here doesn't make him too weak to Storm's Wrath when he can rebuild fairly easily, and it does let him respect some of the other cards that Ari has available.
And holding that Stonecoil Serpent back means that you get to present these big threats on each of the next 3 turns at least. So Ari, the onus is on Ari now to have some kind of defense, which he does. He has the Nightpack Ambusher ready to go. And so for Cedric, this turn is pretty interesting because you could play a Questing Beast and try to get in there, but then do you also want to attack with your other 3 creatures, just offering one of them up to get eaten? And if Ari's on a low life total, maybe that would be worth it to push some damage in. Ari's on 22 life. He's above his starting life total. So I don't know if throwing away that piece on the board is worth it here.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think a lot of it is just going to come down to if he wants to prioritize activating Growth Chamber Guardian or just getting in with the Questing Beast.
So yeah, we see he attacks with everything, and this is kind of offering up the Stonecoil Serpent if Ari wants to pick that off.
Right, and this is a spot where even if Ari does kind of take that and just eat the Stonecoil Serpent, that's basically exchanging the Stonecoil Serpent for an extra 4 points of damage. And if Ari does, in fact, have that Night Pack Ambusher, then it's going to start making tokens and more blockers for a 1/1. So this is Cedric just trying to get what value out of this Stonecoil Serpent he can actually get, even if that card itself is being thrown away in some respects.
And the same goes for a possible Shark Typhoon as well. Ari could make a 2/2 Shark, and yeah, that could gobble up the Stonecoil Serpent, but you'd rather that right now, maybe, than it taking down one of those Growth Chamber Guardians.
Right, and as Ari starts to make more of those wolves, attacking with things like Growth Chamber Guardian is also going to get a lot hairier. So just trying to actually get some amount of pressure in so you can try and sneak across the finish line for those last few points is exactly what you need to be able to posture yourself to do with these aggressive strategies.
Yeah, and we see Ari has trips Uro between his hand and his graveyard, but isn't really in range of escaping one of them without using the Blast Zone. He does get to pick off the Pelt Collector and use all of his mana to escape Uro this turn, and that's a pretty good turn sequence for Ari.
Yeah, absolutely. It just more or less undoes Cedric's previous turn, seeing as Cedric still has a ton of cards in hand. Getting the extra Growth Chamber Guardian is sort of incidental at this point, and being able to develop an Uro to the battlefield against a mono green deck, that's just kind of the biggest kid in school.
Yeah, sometimes you play your Uro and you have to cross your fingers hoping you get to untap with it. In this case, Ari knows he's going to get to untap with it, and regardless of what Cedric's follow-up is, he doesn't even care enough that he would feel motivated to make a risky block or anything like that. He knows he's in the clear.
Right, and this is a spot where you see him just slam this 5/5 Stonecoil Serpent. Cedric is really hoping to find one of those Gem Razors here to just grow this thing into the stratosphere.
But the Ari doesn't even have to act. He's perfectly content just passing the turn, making a Wolf every turn with a Night Pack Ambusher, getting to scry with Castle Vantress, or if Cedric does have a threat, he can load up his Blast Zone to the right converted mana cost. And he also has the Ether Gust, which can just delay everything Cedric's doing by a turn or make combat an absolute blowout if it goes wrong.
Right, and we see Cedric actually picked up another copy of Stonecoil Serpent off the top. This actually creates a situation where Ari might actually struggle to block these creatures because it does happen to bob and weave through that Aether Gust, through that Blast Zone you were talking about. Uro can't even block this because of its protection from multicolor.
Yeah, he may have to sacrifice the Night Pack Ambusher for the cause at some point. I think he's going to give it a turn and get another Wolf out of it first. But he knows that Uro is the premier threat here, and that's what he wants to focus on. But Shifting Ceratops, it kind of mimics a Stonecoil Serpent in terms of having protection from Uro.
Right, and likely if he's leaning into Shifting Ceratops here, the big base that he's trying to cover is Shark Typhoon.
Yes.
We saw Ari not afraid to get aggressive with his Night Pack Ambusher earlier, so this just that kind of alluded towards having Brazen Borrower or Shark Typhoon or something that can actually apply pressure, and Cedric just wants to make sure that doesn't end up running away with this game out of nowhere.
Looking at Ari's list, he starts the full 4 copies of Shark Typhoon. I don't know if all of those would be in his deck after sideboarding necessarily, because he does have a ton of cards to bring in, and beyond the obvious cards, Light Dispute, Light Negate, you're cutting a good card regardless, and especially on the draw, a Shark Typhoon, it can be a little clunky, and Cedric's creatures are so large that, against mono red, you cycle it for 1, you block a Scorch Spitter and trade off. That feels pretty good. Against Cedric, you're going to have to cycle that for a high value of X to get a trade in there.
Right. So there we do see an attack where Cedric actually forces a trade with the Night Pack Ambusher, just Ari trying to reduce the resources that players have available to them, only for Cedric to slam a 6/6 Stonecoil Serpent post-combat.
And this is not easy for Ari to get off the board. One card that Ari does not have that many of these lists do is Brazen Borrower, which granted is only a temporary answer. But without that, Scorching Dragonfire is not going to do it. Storm's Wrath is not going to do it. Maybe if you back up one of those with an explosion to like pump up the damage by copying it, that's fine. But this 6/6 is just it's marking its territory here. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. That said, the Shark Typhoon that Ari just drew, he can make a very big shark.
Right, and this is the big draw to having Shark Typhoon in your deck in the post-board games here, is that it is actually one of the ways that this deck can check a colorless 0-drop creature. Shark Typhoon isn't always going to be the most elegant thing, but honestly, sometimes you just need a card to do a job.
It is surprising just how often that protection from multicolored on Stonecoil Serpent comes up. You look at it during the Throne of Eldraine preview season, and just in that context, it doesn't seem that relevant. Bearing in mind we are in a Ravnica standard format with a lot of these powerful multicolored cards, including cards from other blocks like Uro, it actually comes up time and time again. And the reach also can come up time and time again because no one remembers that it has it. It's buried beneath 5 different lines of text, and you can definitely get people if they just get some greedy attack in with a tiny shark and it gets swallowed whole by a Stonecoil Serpent.
All right, well, look at this attack. Cedric sends everything into the end zone, and we get a trade with that Shark Typhoon for the Stonecoil Serpent, but Ari goes down to 8.
Yeah, Cedric making a really valiant effort here. I kind of assumed that this game was locked up for Ari, and I think Ari is still solidly ahead, but Cedric is at least making him think about this a little.
Oh, and we see the shame post-combat activation of Growth Chamber Guardian. Honestly, Cedric saying oops and everything.
See, he knows he's on stream. He can't hide it, right? I mean, this is all out there in public view, so no attempt to cover up that. But honestly, adapting Growth Chamber Guardian... you really do. But adapting the Guardian feels kind of shameful in itself. I remember when that card was previewed, that seemed like it was going to be a defining part of that standard format. But it turns out that just investing all your mana slowly over time to make a stream of 4/4s just doesn't really cut it with how powerful everything else in the format is.
Right. Everything is just kind of defined by the amount of mana that you can sink into things, and sinking 5 mana into your 4 power and 4 toughness, otherwise vanilla creature, is not that exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, if you're in Cedric's seat, you got to know what floating all this mana means. It means explosion 4/4 at Questing Beast. And Uro coming across to attack, make another land, or just draw another Aether Gust. Either way, hard to complain too much about this.
And Cedric's going to make... I was going to say Cedric's going to make Ari finish the job, but he does pack it in here. And so we'll go back to sideboarding. Looking at what the two players are doing, would you want to switch anything around for either of them?
I think there's a little bit that you could end up looking to change if you're on the play in Ari's seat. We see him mousing over Commence the Endgame. That's likely to just pay a little bit more respect to Stonecoil Serpent. But for the most part, I think things are going to stay mostly the same. You can actually see that Wilderness Reclamation has been cut from Ari's deck, and that's just out of respect for those things like Gem Razor.
Oh. And I love this. We just at the moment that we highlighted that, we saw Cedric mousing over his own Gem Razors, which are now in the sideboard. He understands he knows the leveling wall that's going on here. And if Gem Razor is just a 4/4 trample mutate, which I believe also has reach for some reason, but don't quote me on that.
Secret reach.
Yes. Then that is pretty underwhelming, all things considered. Oh, this is a nice hand for Cedric. We're coming out well. We got a powerful 2-drop in the Barkhide Troll. We got Wildborn Preserver. He can go turn 2 Preserver into Troll, put a count on it, make 2 3/3s, and then the Questing Beast is a nice follow-up too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just your bread and butter. 3 lands, 4 creatures in a curve. It's exactly where Cedric wants to be in this matchup.
And this feels like a grudging keep from Ari here, who, he's got good mana, he's got the Storm's Wrath, he's got a Shark Typhoon that maybe he can cycle to make something happen, but he knows that this hand, if he doesn't draw a Growth Spiral, doesn't draw a cheap interactive card, that he could be dead by the time that Storm's Wrath ends up coming down.
Yeah, this is actually a really tough place for Ari to be. What it's going to be interesting is to see if Shark Typhoon gets cycled this turn, or if it makes a 1/1 chump blocker on turn 3 in order to try and bridge the gap to Storm's Wrath.
Right, and with those 2 Shocklands in his hand, I think Ari values the potential life gain in the future, just saving the 2 life, getting the tap land into play right now. And yeah, with how fast Cedric's draw is, those two points could be very relevant indeed.
You're right, and I assume that Cedric is going to have the Storm's Wrath on his radar if he gets to attack next turn, and then Ari doesn't have a growth spiral, a bunch of tap lands. There's got to be a reason that a pro tour champion, a player as good as Ari Lax, kept this hand, right?
Cedric would bet his life savings on Ari having a Storm's Wrath, and look at that card in his hand. Giant Growth is the perfect counter to Storm's Wrath. Not one that immediately jumps to mind when you think about how to fight that card, but it is going to be incredible here.
Right, there's even a point where we could see something from Cedric to the effect of a Stone Coil Serpent for 1, putting 2 mana into the Wildborn Preserver on the battlefield, attacking for a total of 9, and then having Giant Growth to save Barkhide Troll and Wildborn Preserver from a sweeper next turn.
And even following that up with the Cresting Beast afterwards.
Right. There are all kinds of things that Cedric can do here, which really just speaks to how complex this standard format is right now. The mono green attack, get you dead, mono creatures deck has, 3 different lines that it could take this turn?
I mean, each of the creatures in play has 3 or 4 different lines of text on it as well. You know, these aren't just vanilla, big, dumb animals. These are creatures that have some play to them. And I fear that the end game here may already have commenced. I think we are in what you hear some people affectionately call garbage time, where we are wrapping up, and it is going to take something drastic to get back in the game.
You know, I don't think it's impossible, though. Aether Gust, very powerful card that could buy Ari a ton of time from here. And just finding things like Uro off the top can say Uro into Aether Gust, for example, would do a ton for Ari's life total and his standing in this game.
Yeah, I think one thing that Cedric is really thinking about is, okay, I can beat a Storm's Wrath. Can I beat Aether Gust or Dragonfire into a Storm's Wrath? And how do I effectively maneuver against those combinations of cards? And if I play against that one way, well, then am I more vulnerable to one of those interactive cards into a Nightpack Ambush or something like that?
Mm-hmm, right. It's all about just which cards Cedric wants to play around here.
Yeah, and it seems like he's hovering over your line of loading up counters on that Wildborn Preserver, which, again, he could have done pre-combat, but then the information you gain from attacking and seeing what Ari does might be more relevant here than the 2 damage, where, you know, if Cedric's winning this game, it's probably in these large chunks of damage, and it's unclear if 2 life is going to be the deal breaker.
Right, that was just him playing around exactly the card Aether Gust.
Yeah, and so you see right here, okay, Ari has a Storm's Wrath. Cedric is attacking for 5, 8, 12, 13 with a Cresting Beast. Like, yeah, the 2 points are not relevant.
And honestly,